A racist white cop thought he could humiliate an elderly black woman in a parking lot, completely clueless that the woman he was mocking is the living nightmare of enemies worldwide, a legendary Navy SEAL who's wiped out terrorist camps before breakfast. And this time, she didn't need a weapon. Just her presence was enough to make the entire system tremble. He thought she was just some old lady? Wrong. She's a war machine, trained to end threats before they even breathe. One insult, one arrogant glare, and he just torched his entire career with his own filthy mouth. This isn't a confrontation. This is a public execution of ego, delivered by a woman who's earned more respect than his badge ever will. Are you ready to see a corrupt system get ripped apart by the very person it tried to belittle? Watch the full video and drop a comment, because this time, justice doesn't scream, it just stares you down and makes you crumble. Sunlight glared off the pavement as its warmth kissed the skin of a parking lot nestled in a bustling neighborhood, a mundane stage for a drama that would soon unfold. Birds sang their timeless melodies overhead, indifferent to the tension brewing below. An elderly black woman, her hair a graceful crown of silver, shuffled purposefully to her car, her weary but resolute gaze meeting those around her. She carried the weight of decades in her quiet demeanor, an ever-present whisper of battles fought and victories claimed. Yet today, her unassuming presence belied a storm brewing within a single moment of injustice. "Hey, lady, you can't park here!" The shout sliced through the morning air, a rusty blade of disdain and presumption. The speaker, a police officer in full uniform, strode over, skin flushed with the authority of his badge, ignorance festering beneath his stern exterior. His voice was jagged, vibrating with the cool indifference of someone accustomed to issuing commands. She paused, her grip tightening on her cane, raising her chin to meet his gaze. The depth of her eyes suggested stories she never needed to voice aloud. "You hear me? Move it, or I'll have you towed," he barked, stepping closer, his shadow casting a long silhouette on the tarred earth. Her silence only irked him further. The quiet dignity she embodied was a stark contrast to his bluster. The officer's hand hovered over his belt, not out of necessity, but to amplify his perceived dominance. An everyday routine for him, a spectacle not unfamiliar to those who gathered at a cautious distance, phones already emerging to document the burgeoning conflict. "I'm within my rights to be here," she finally stated, her voice unwavering, mellow yet firm as the undertow of a river. The officer sneered, unable to grasp the hidden power she wielded through years of disciplined resilience. To him, she was nothing more than an obstacle, an inconvenience in his regimented day. "Damn woman, think the law doesn't apply to you." His eyes flashed contempt, and as he stepped directly into her path, he embodied an oppressive history he'd never had to confront himself. Around them, murmurs rose. Some among the crowd recognized her, not merely as a neighbor, but as the legendary figure her past concealed. But here, in this moment, her reputation was a ghostly veil, transparent yet obscured by age and the bias it invoked. "You should watch who you're talking to," muttered a bystander, too low for the officer to notice, though his disdain was deafening in the ears of those who knew her story. In the silence that followed, the air crackled with latent defiance. This wasn't just another confrontation. It was a catalyst, a spark ready to ignite a chain reaction of awareness and reckoning. The old woman, undeterred by the uniformed affront, demonstrated patience learned on battlefields far from the safety of home. She studied the officer again, a man so consumed by his own illusion of authority that he couldn't perceive the irony of his assumptions. He was the embodiment of a system built to intimidate, but she was the spirit of resistance that system had never managed to quell. And so she stood there, a sentinel in her own right, challenging not just the man in front of her, but the privilege and prejudice woven into the fabric of his convictions. The situation simmered with an electrifying intensity, setting the stage for what would soon unravel, the striking, unexpected truth held within her stoic silence. In the moments leading up to the officer's realization, one could only anticipate the monumental shift about to crack the veneer of his ignorance, sending ripples of change in all directions. What he derisively failed to see was a history of fortitude she held like a secret weapon, concealed beneath the simplicity of her appearance. Beneath a facade of deference lay a command of fear and respect, hidden in plain sight, ready to erupt with the force of her unspoken legacy, a power that waited merely for acknowledgement. The officer, in his self-assured naivety, had unwittingly set the stage for a showdown that not only exposed one woman's indomitable spirit, but also sparked a narrative of justice long overdue. The crowd that gathered around the spectacle in the parking lot was an exemplar of the bustling diversity of the neighborhood. Their murmurs rose and fell like the tide, a low rumble of disbelief and wary anticipation. People pulled out their smartphones to record the incident, their intentions as mixed as their emotions, some driven by a desire for justice, others simply captivated by the scene's raw, unscripted drama. "Can you believe this?" a young man's voice carried, his eyes darting between his phone screen and the altercation. He wore a baseball cap tilted backward, a look of frustration etched into his features. "It's always the same story. Different day, same bullshit." Next to him, an older woman nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She had lived through decades of injustice, her history painted with the struggles for civil rights that still echoed into the present day. Her presence, like that of the elderly woman at the center, embodied a quiet resilience. The officer, oblivious to the spreading ripple of condemnation from the onlookers, was lost in the exercise of his authority. "You think I'm playing, huh?" His tone dripped with mock patience, an arrogant edge punctuating his words, as if he couldn't decide whether to be amused or incensed by her audacity. The elderly woman, standing her ground with unwavering grace, seemed unimpressed by his theatrics. Her face betrayed nothing, a testament to years spent honing her composure under far more dangerous circumstances. Each condescending remark he offered bounced harmlessly off her, as if she wore an invisible armor forged in the crucible of her past. "I don't understand why she's just standing there," whispered a young woman to her friend, the phone recording steady in her hands. Her comment was more wonder than criticism, an acknowledgement of the quiet power that seemed to radiate from the old woman's every pore. Meanwhile, the officer doubled down, as if determined to force a response from her just through sheer belligerence. He gestured broadly to the gathered crowd, playing to an audience he neither acknowledged nor respected. "We got laws here," he proclaimed, his voice booming, "and you can't just ignore 'em 'cause you feel like it." His words hung in the air, resonating less as a declaration of justice and more as a display of unchecked privilege. The irony wasn't lost on the crowd. Their faces reflected a spectrum from disbelief to simmering anger. They could see what the officer could not. This wasn't just a confrontation between him and the elderly woman. It was a proxy battle for greater systemic issues that lay rotting under the veneer of polite society. A young man in the crowd, emboldened by the anonymity of numbers or perhaps the woman's unyielding presence, shouted across the asphalt, "You don't know who you're messing with, officer!" His voice carried a mix of defiance and warning. There was a pause, a collective inhalation, as people waited for the officer's reaction. He waved his hand dismissively, the gesture dismissing not just the comment, but the very idea that he could be at fault, that his actions were anything but justified by the uniform he wore. Doesn't matter who anyone thinks they are. Here, everybody's subject to the law. The old woman, much like the trunk of an ancient oak weathering the storm, stood firm. Her silence was a statement clearer than words, the embodiment of unadulterated calm in the face of ignorant fury. She watched the officer, her gaze penetrating but serene, an uncomfortable mirror reflecting his arrogance and spoonfuls of his own decay. Then, as if pulled from the depths of memory, a voice rang out, hers composed, steady, yet with a tone as sharp as a honed blade. "The law should apply equally to everyone. Perhaps you've forgotten what justice looks like." The officer paused for a moment, caught off guard, as if struck by a sudden swell of doubt. A flicker of recognition flashed across his face, an awareness that perhaps he was stepping into deeper waters than he had anticipated. Quickly he brushed it away, unwilling to accept what lay before him. In that moment, the crowd felt the shift, a tangible alteration of control that seemed to drift ever so slightly from the officer towards the woman. Their phones captured the subtle power dynamic change, fueled by an anticipation for what revelations might emerge from this cloud of tension and false assumptions. Unbeknownst to those huddled around, busy immortalizing the confrontation in bytes and pixels, the woman's restraint was the precursor to a profound unveiling, one that would not only redefine the day's event, but echo across a narrative of justice long silenced by ignorance and systemic racial bias. Amidst the tension clouding the parking lot, the elderly woman's eyes flickered with an inner light, one that recognized the scene from a long history of battles faced, both large and small. Her defiance was subtle yet palpable, an undercurrent of silent strength that refused to be bowed by the officer's overbearing presence. The officer, now pacing like a restless predator, finally stopped before her, a sneer curling his lips. "Why don't you speak up, huh? Say something?" His words were daggers, aimed at provoking a reaction, his patience, such as it was, fraying with every silent second. She took a soft breath before lifting her eyes to meet his, her gaze unwavering, as if she were peering through him, through the badge, through the facade of arrogance that shielded his ignorance. "Actions speak louder than words, officer," she began, her voice smooth as silk, yet as immovable as iron, each syllable weighted with the wisdom of countless challenges overcome. Unfazed, the officer leaned in, his shadow looming over her like a dark omen. "You're just causing a scene for nothing," he shot back, desperation an uninvited guest in his bravado. Around them, the crowd leaned in, spellbound by the tension hanging so thick it was almost tactile. There was a palpable energy in the air, a sense that they were witnessing something, not just a clash of authority and dissent, but a statement of life's enduring and unspoken truths. As if on cue, the woman shifted slightly, her posture, a study of calmness honed over decades. "I have seen worse than you." Her voice was a low melody, a song of resilience murmured against the roar of ignorance. The words cut sharper than any knife, laced with the weight of experiences beyond his comprehension. Her statement pierced the moment, stirring an ineffable weight that descended on those who watched. It was an echo from her past, a reminder of her service and sacrifice, her unseen victories painted on a canvas of shadowed memories. The officer blinked, caught off guard by the potency of her words, the chill of self-awareness pricking his skin for perhaps the first time in his career. His bravado flickered momentarily, uncertainty crossing his face as he struggled to maintain his grasp on the reins of control. From behind them, a new voice piped up. A bystander, emboldened by the woman's calm strength, decided to speak. "What's wrong, officer?" called a young man, his phone held high. "Afraid you might actually learn something today?" The crowd shifted, murmurs of agreement buzzing in the air, electric with silent applause for the audacity of truth. The officer's eyes darted left and right, involuntary reflex to a fortress suddenly under siege. His authority, typically absolute, was fracturing beneath the foreign terrain of public scrutiny and the quiet, unyielding strength of one woman. Abruptly, he got up and walked to the only other. For the first time, he seemed to notice the eyes upon him, no longer just passive observers, but a jury of justice in their own right. A prickle of sweat gathered at the base of his neck, his command now a precarious balance on the brink of collapse. "You don't get it, do you?" The woman's voice was soft, nearly lost beneath the growing hume of the crowd. Her gaze held steady, not with hostility, but with an understanding that brought a profound stillness to the moment. "I've fought for the right to stand here. We all have." The crowd's noise swelled once more, a crescendo of shared acknowledgement and solidarity. In those few words, she spoke not only for herself, but as a defender against systems of oppression, her history stretching beyond the realms of perception. The officer opened his mouth, poised to retort, but found his voice muted by the gathering storm of realization dawning upon him. A realization that his was not just a challenge against an old woman, but a confrontation with a legacy larger and more indomitable than he ever imagined. There, in the midst of a suburban parking lot, the narrative shifted, a drama not merely about authority challenged, but a herald of change rippling through the silent forces of societal injustice. Here, the officer's ignorance confronted its only worthy opponent, the truth embodied in her still stance and quiet defiance, threatening to unravel the comfortable fabric of his misconceptions. As the parking lot simmered with the charged atmosphere of resistance and looming revelation, the old woman's mind flickered with images not of static scenes, but of moving experiences that painted her distinguished past. Her memories, once like ghostly specters in a forgotten museum, began to reanimate before her, each one whispering truths of battles unseen by those surrounding her now. Her name, Beth Hawkins, once echoed with reverence in circles of command where silence was often an honored tradition. Her tenure as a Navy SEAL had been marked by an unwavering resolve and a reputation for courage that put fear into the hearts of foes. She had moved through trenches where life hung precariously between breaths, her skills a whisper on the wind among those who dared to underestimate her. And yet, through it all, Beth had always maintained a low profile, her service cloaked in the anonymity preferred by those who knew the cost of true valor. The image of her in her prime was a stark contrast to how she appeared now, a silver-haired sentinel standing quietly, her strength masked by age, but no less formidable. She blinked, shaking off her reverie as the officer stepped back, his face screwed up in perplexed frustration, clearly grasping at straws, unable to fully stash away the creeping doubt pulling at his confidence. His gaze lingered too long on her, aware that something significant lay beneath her outer fragility, like storm currents beneath calm waters. "Lady," he began, hesitating slightly as he spoke, the uncertainty worming its way into his voice. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're obstructing justice here." At that, a murmur snaked through the onlookers, an unbridled mix of amusement and irritation. The statement was so predictably laced with procedural rhetoric that it only served to highlight his oblivion rather than enforce the law he claimed to represent. Beth regarded him thoughtfully, her gaze a gentle but immovable force, breaching the pretensions of his authority. "Justice, officer?" she queried softly, her words like the careful steps of an infiltrator moving through enemy territory, precise and weighted. "Or is it just personal interest dressed in a badge today?" Her question lingered, unchallenged and unreturned, and his retort, bottled in his gut, found itself silenced by the crowd's collective intake of breath, a fuller understanding beginning to weave through the shared space of disbelief and hope. They were witnessing not merely an act of defiance, but an unmasking of truths painted in silence. A middle-aged woman towards the front, looking through thick glasses, exclaimed to her companion, "She ain't just someone standing up to him. She stood up to much worse." Her whisper carried, the truth of it spreading inadvertently through the crowd like wildfire, each person absorbing and passing it on, the narrative shifting from mere speculation to realism. Beth remained at the center of this storm, a lighthouse amidst swirling confusion and rising understanding. She was a relic from an era of valor, of duty, defined not by applause, but by unwavering commitment to something greater than one's self-image. Her heart thudded softly in her chest, steady like the gentle drum of a distant parade honoring lives unseen, yet unforgettable. Beth was no mere anomaly to be dismissed by a wave of a negligent hand. She was the embodiment of forgotten voices, a living testament to resistance enduring the erosion of time and harsh judgment. The officer's face, once rigid with overeager authority, began to show the cracks of retreat, his defenses faltering under the relentless barrage of truths he hadn't prepared for. He looked away, focusing on the asphalt, the stark awareness of the narrative slipping away from him fully realized. Then, as if fate lent a hand, a voice emerged, clear, authoritative, familiar. Beth Hawkins. It wasn't a question, but a quiet confirmation that cut through the tension like a revelatory lightning bolt. The crowd's attention pivoted to a newcomer, a man with military stride evident in his steps as he approached. His gaze locked onto her with respect and acknowledgement. He wore the insignia of one who had served, his demeanor suggesting deep allegiance to principles once shared with her. Recognition dawned in every watching eye, cascading until it crested into an unmistakable recognition of shared heritage. Beth allowed herself a rare, soft smile, a brief knowing exchange that passed between them like old comrades hailed in a moment of understanding. Here was an echo of her past, woven unmistakably into the present, grounding her purpose in the reassurance of unswerving loyalty. This shift, this new presence, reignited the palpable tension, transforming it further into an undeniable testament, even one that the officer, now stepped back into the crowd's judging circumference, could not negate. In the stillness that reigned, there was an acknowledgement among the people, a witnessing of legacy unfurling like a flag, a powerful reminder that justice isn't simply administered by those who wear the sign of law, but by those who embody the spirit of it, in the face of all that seeks to silence the righteous and the brave. Standing at the edge of the scene was Clarence Thompson, a sharp-eyed attorney known locally for his advocacy work against racial injustice. The moment Beth Hawkins's name escaped the lips of the veteran who had recognized her, a flurry of activity settled within him. Here was an opportunity not just to witness history, but to effect change right at its roots, where the mundane collided with the extraordinary. The murmurs of the crowd began to ebb as Clarence stepped forward with a determined stride. His reputation preceded him. Whispers of his name reached Beth's ears even before he spoke, each syllable curling around the gathered like vines of inevitable truth. "Officer," Clarence addressed, his voice cutting clean through the humid air, carrying weight and assurance, born from countless hours spent in the courtroom advocating for those unheard and undervalued. "Do you know who you're standing before?" There was a resonance in his words, an underlying promise that this standoff was more than a mere clash of wills. It was now a legal battlefront, one that demanded the scales of justice be re-evaluated and, if necessary, recalibrated. Beth turned slightly to acknowledge her would-be ally, her nod one of appreciation and acknowledgement for the part he played in this ever-unfolding drama. She understood the importance of voices like his, fearless in spaces that often discouraged dissent. Clarence didn't wait for a reply from the officer, who stood rigid, his grasp on power visibly loosening. Instead, the attorney shifted his focus directly to the crowd. Racial profiling is not just unethical, it's illegal. Under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, this kind of discrimination is a violation of federal law. The crowd murmured its agreement, the backdrop buzzing with the sound of smartphones capturing and amplifying this pivotal moment. A blow against systemic prejudice using the hammer of the law. Beth's eyes met Clarence's briefly, a silent exchange passing between them that transcended mere gratitude. It was the abiding camaraderie of those who stand unjustly accused, but resolute. The officer, now more a pawn in this shifting narrative, opened and closed his mouth, struggling for the words that might reclaim a semblance of authority, but his efforts were merely perfunctory, his grip on the situation slipping like sand through his fingers. "Beth Hawkins served this country," Clarence continued, his voice rising in conviction. "She was a Navy SEAL, dedicated her life to the protection of freedoms that you, officer, have sworn to uphold." There was a noticeable shift in the crowd as understanding washed over them, a transformation from observers to participants in this story of unfolding justice. Each face reflected a spectrum of emotions, from those who marveled at her concealed identity to others charged with renewed fervor to confront their own injustices. Beth remained a bastion of calm in the storm, the revelations doing little to unseat her intrinsic poise. She didn't seek acknowledgement for her past exploits. They were merely facets of her life lived in service. And yet, here they were, essential armor against the uninformed assumptions of the present. Backpedaling, the officer finally stammered a defense. I was just trying to do my job, he offered feebly, the authority in his voice now a wisp against the strata of undeniable truth before him. That may be, Clarence replied, pressing forward with the kind of relentless empathy that wove through his professional life. But perhaps it's time we reevaluate what that job truly means. The silence that followed was not empty, but brimming with the creakings of societal gears turning ever so slightly toward change. It wasn't just about Beth and the uniformed man before her. It was a spotlight on a broader stage of accountability and reform. Meanwhile, Beth held the lines of her face smooth, her calm a masterful contrast against the disillusionment playing across the officer's features. Here was justice, not just as a concept, but as a living, breathing interaction of truth, revealing how biases so deeply embedded in those gifted with authority could crumble under the weight of accountability. And in that quiet aftermath of revelation, with all eyes on her, Beth felt a ripple of change emanating outward, a new chapter wherein respect and understanding might yet find fertile soil in a landscape long barren and harsh. Each gathered soul there knew, as did Beth and Clarence, that this was but a moment in the shifting tide, a rallying cry that might spur on the conversations necessary to dismantle systemic racial prejudice, one confrontation at a time. The officer's face flushed a deep shade of crimson, his breath quickening as he struggled to maintain his composure amidst the smothering weight of his exposed arrogance and the rising tide of contempt from the surrounding crowd. He was a man cornered by his own ignorance, a lone figure grappling with the crumbling fortress of assumed superiority. His radio crackled to life at his hip, the static like needles of pressure against the strange new quiet that had enveloped the parking lot. Words sputtered incoherently from the device, each syllable a reminder that the world continued its relentless spin, even as his own stood perilously still. Clarence hadn't moved, his stance the embodiment of unwavering patience and practiced poise. He watched the officer with the calm expectancy of an educator waiting for a pupil to grasp an essential lesson. The officer cleared his throat, trying again, his voice now wavering under the weight of public scrutiny. I wasn't aware of her history, and yet here we stand, Clarence intoned smoothly, his presence enveloping the officer in the relentless light of accountability. History matters, officer. It's shaped us, shaped her. It demands respect. The officer's jaw worked, his pride writhing like a living thing beneath his skin, yet no words of further projection could form. A cauldron of unvoiced confusion and anger held him in its grip. Beth Hawkins watched, layers of her own perspective unfurling silently. She understood his rage all too well, had known its bitter taste during her years in uniform, when society's biases burned nearly as fiercely as her enemy's gunfire. But here, compassion simmered alongside justice, their intertwined forms a testament to the better angels of human nature, a vital counterbalance to ignorance and enmity. Witnessing this impasse, a child broke free from his mother's grasp, weaving through the wall of legs to stand beside Beth, his tiny presence a beacon of innocence amidst the charged moment. He looked up at her with eyes full of awe and youthful defiance, his voice piping up with all the oblivious wisdom of the very young. "I knew you were a hero," he said simply, a declaration that seemed to transcend time and context, piercing the tension with the purity of unfiltered truth. The air shifted palpably, the tension diffusing under the weight of the boy's simple acknowledgement. The crowd collectively exhaled, and with it they exhumed a whisper of hope that maybe, just maybe, this was a turning point. Beth smiled down at him, her weathered hand reaching gently to touch his soft curls. "Thank you, young man," she replied, each word steeped in warmth and sincerity. "Being brave isn't just about what you've done. Sometimes it's about standing up when it's hard. The crowd's reaction was almost as if orchestrated by the essence of her words. Subtle nods, understanding glance between strangers, and the hum of community solidarity entwining at the seams of shared experience. Even the most hardened in their biases felt that tether tug, clenching with simple, universal truths voiced by the innocent. Never mind, beauty demands. Meanwhile, the officer's brow furrowed deeply, the tumult of his emotions etched visible into the lines of his face. The presence of that wide-eyed boy seemed to act as both a mirror and a catalyst, reflecting the stark reality of his misguided authority and sparking the first embers of introspection. Beth didn't turn away, didn't allow the moment to lose its potency. "Perhaps it's time, officer," she said, her tone inviting rather than condemning, "to consider what it means to serve everyone in this community with the respect and dignity we all deserve." The reflective humility threading his countenance hinted at the possibility of change, not just for him, but perhaps for the emblem he wore and the institution it represented, a seed planted in fertile soil from which redemption might yet grow. I'll remember this," he finally managed, his words a hushed promise, whispered through a throat tight with newfound awareness. Clarence nodded, satisfaction evident, though restrained. He understood the roots of change dug deepest when nurtured by the individual's realization and commitment. This wasn't victory, but it was something, a movement, and within it lay the promise of greater transformation. As people began to disperse, their hearts lighter with the familiar weight of justice spoken aloud, Beth remained, watching as the officer turned away, shoulders slightly hunched, but his step purposeful, though burdened by the stark illumination of today's confrontation. It was in this silence, the aftermath of action and awakening, that Beth stood, radiating grace and quiet fortitude. Around her, the echoes of advocacy and the whispers of stories yet untold awaited their opportunity to swell into full-throated chorus, a reminder that true justice would not rest but would continue to demand its due under her diligent watch. As the crowd began to dissipate, animated conversations sprang up among the individuals who remained, their voices threading together an intricate tapestry of shared experiences and newfound resolve. Each phone screen illuminated the scene with a glow resembling celestial observers, capturing and streaming every moment to a worldwide audience, poised to amplify the tale of Beth Hawkins' quiet defiance. A teenage girl, her curly hair catching the sunlight, turned to her mother, her eyes wide with the gravity of what they had witnessed. "Do you think people will see this?" she asked, her voice a blend of doubt and hope. Her mother wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulder, nodding slowly. "They will, sweetheart, and maybe they'll finally understand." Nearby, a man fiddled with his social media app, already typing a passionate post on the power of watching an elderly woman rise like a phoenix from the ashes of their assumptions. A viral wave was in motion, each post a stone tossed into the digital sea, creating ripples of awareness and calls for justice across virtual spaces. One woman wiped a tear from her cheek, speaking with the kind of fervor that life's injustices often instill in those who wore the burden of witnessing too many. "It's stories like hers that remind us of what really matters," she said to her companion, a man wearing an old veteran's cap and an air of experienced resolve. "I've got a mind to make sure every last precinct sees this video," he replied with a firm nod. Not far away, Beth stood with Clarence by her side. His presence was reassuring, the kind of steadfast allyship that promises neither glory nor reward, but offers something far more precious: solidarity. They surveyed the dispersing crowd together, the stories now spreading through them like wildfire, ready to rage against the age-old barriers they'd faced and would continue to dismantle. Clarence glanced at Beth, his eyes filled with the understanding that came from years of pushing against tides that refused to turn. "The one thing they have to remember," he began, his voice resonating with shared convictions, "is that every action counts, especially the quiet ones." Beth acknowledged his words with a nod, her heart swollen with the weight of all that had transpired, not just today, but throughout the years she spent challenging the status quo, both overtly and in the shadows. These moments, she allowed, the curve of her lips gentle but firm, they plant seeds, and those seeds, they grow. As the last of the onlookers trickled away, some lingering to speak with newly found friends united by purpose, a group of local activists began their own mini-assembly. Inspired by Beth's poise and Clarence's call to action, they gathered at the edges of the parking lot, buzzing with energy and urgency. Beth watched them, her presence now less a participant in the unfolding narrative and more a catalyst in the ongoing saga of change. These community members, teachers, workers, parents, were not content to let the day's events remain mere anecdotes. They were mobilizing, discussing ways to address the policing issues within their neighborhoods, the system that had for so long demanded sightlessness to their own suffering. "We should put this on the agenda for the next town hall," suggested an earnest voice, a young woman with a notebook clasped to her chest like a shield. "What happened today proves we need oversight, not just empty promises." Others agreed, their heads nodding with the rhythm of conviction that had been sorely absent in previous attempts to engage with local authorities. They began to draft their thoughts, their language energetic and raw, their agenda growing more substantial with each passionately shared idea. Beth's heart swelled with pride. These were successors to her battles, ready to uplift and carry forward the mantle of resistance and reform. It was a legacy not written in medals but engraved in the lives touched and changed, in the echoes of voices lifted in unison against injustice. Clarence glanced at Beth, observing the spark in her eyes as they watched the seeds of change being sown with every conversation. "Looks like you've started something powerful today," he remarked. Beth shook her head with humility born from experience. "No, Clarence," she replied, her eyes never leaving the young activists animatedly strategizing. "We all did." In that moment, her legacy felt secure, not in static accolades or accolades long past, but in this living testament to change, a living, breathing movement that would carry forward with renewed vigor, nourished by the wisdom of the past and the enthusiasm of the present. As the shades of late afternoon began their subtle descent over the town, Beth stood at the heart of a freshly kindled spirit, knowing that the fire of justice, once lit, would continue to burn. Embers passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, ensuring that righteousness never slumber, nor justice be denied its rightful place. As the gathered crowd dispersed and the parking lot emptied, the world seemed to pause in the wake of the confrontation that had transpired. Yet, for Beth Hawkins, the real work had only just begun. Alone, she felt the familiar pull of memories washing over her, like shadows cast by a fading sun, each one whispering of the past she had lived through and the battles fought in different theaters of war. She took a moment to close her eyes, shutting out the present to immerse herself in the echo of her own history, a history that had shaped her into the woman standing, undaunted, in today's time of reckoning. Decades earlier, Beth had been a young recruit in a male-dominated world, the enormity of her challenges sharpened by the double edge of her gender and skin color. She remembered the skeptical glances and the whispered doubts, the way her first commanding officer had looked right through her as if she were invisible. It had only fueled her determination to prove she belonged, not just as a participant, but as an essential part of the team. In those early days, her SEAL training had been unrelenting, each grueling session designed to push beyond perceived limits. From the icy waters of covert infiltrations to the scorching heat of distant lands, every mission demanded the utmost of her physical prowess and mental agility. Each moment felt like a test of endurance, not only against external enemies, but against the prejudices entrenched within her own ranks. And yet, her resilience had been forged in these fires. She had withstood the pressure of doubt and fear looming over her like the relentless tide. Her grit transformed skepticism into respect as she rose to become one of the most venerated operatives in her unit. Her reputation, a quiet legend whispered through the corridors of military life. It was in the midst of one mission, buried deep within hostile territory, that her mettle had been truly tested. Her unit, trapped in an orchestrated ambush, looked to her in those perilous moments. Leading leading them through the chaos. Her voice had been their beacon, her strategic brilliance, their key to surviving where certainty had dissolved into the chaos of uncertainty. Back in the present, the brief tinkling of wind chimes broke her reverie, tugging her gently back to the now where the sun had shifted, casting long indigo shadows on the ground. Her eyes opened to the intimate peace around her, the familiar wariness of combat replaced by the subtle peace of another battle well fought. "Still got it, Beth," she murmured to herself, with a small, almost mischievous smile tugging at the corners of her lips, a silent acknowledgment that the battlefield may have shifted from foreign soils to suburban streets, but her resolve remained unwavering. Her musings were interrupted as Clarence approached, having lingered behind to speak with the activists inspired by her quiet defiance. His presence grounded her, a connection forged not through words but through the mutual understanding of time spent fighting against systems slow to change. "Ready to take on the world, or at least our town?" he asked, his tone light, but carrying the weight of understanding that only fellow advocates knew. Beth chuckled softly, nodding. "I think we've already begun, Clarence. Doesn't hurt to back it up with a little planning, though." He grinned, the kind of grin that spoke of shared victories, both past and future. "That's the spirit. There's talk already about the impact your story's having. Videos going viral, people voicing calls for police accountability and rallies forming. It's a wildfire, Beth, and you lit the spark." Images of past soldiers drifted through her mind, comrades in arms who had also lit sparks, flickers of hope in dark corners of the world. She thought of those who had stood beside her, their lives interwoven with hers through shared purpose and achieved dreams, many of whom had made the ultimate sacrifice for the causes they believed in. The echoes of their lives, strong, steadfast, and unyielding, grounded her in gratitude for their service and sacrifice. This was her legacy, not as an isolated torchbearer, but as part of a continuing line of brave souls demanding recognition for their roles in reshaping narratives. Beth felt the evening chill begin to settle, a reminder of the oncoming night, but no longer did its approach seem ominous. Instead, it promised the renewal and continuance of journeys that had only just begun to unfold. Her heart was a drum, its beat steady as she considered the promise of tomorrow, clad in possibility. Her gaze lingered on Clarence's face, seeing in his determined eyes the essence of a torch passed down generational pathways. "Time's always been on our side," she whispered, knowing that patience, like resilience, was the quiet core of all lasting reforms. With the certainty of history behind her and the pulse of future hope ahead, Beth Hawkins knew her story would continue to ripple through the pages of change, its fingerprints indelibly etched onto the fabric of justice, yet unwritten. With a last nod, she and Clarence turned away, moving towards the heart of their shared struggle, the evening sky overhead painted in hues of resolve, comfort, and relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. The parking lot was now nearly empty, silence settling like a thick blanket over the scene of recent upheaval. Beth stood alone, her back gently against the cool metal of her car, when a subtle breeze picked up, rustling the leaves overhead and whispering secrets of the past in her ear. It was a moment suspended in time, where the world seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the next act in her ongoing narrative. Within, she felt the stirrings of introspection, the presence of her past folding seamlessly into the fabric of the present. It was as if the shadows of her former life as a Navy SEAL lingered just beyond sight, grounding her in the strength that had carried her through both war-torn lands and battles of unjust prejudice. Her heart was a vessel of stories yet to be told, all coiled tightly like the wicks of 100 candles, waiting to be lit. Beth's quiet reflection was just that, quiet, until the soft crunch of gravel underfoot announced an incoming figure. Her gaze lifted, mild curiosity at the gentle interruption, only to meet the warm eyes of a journalist she had met once during campaign work for Veteran Affairs. He was an unassuming man, his demeanor non-threatening, with a camera slung over his shoulder and a notebook tucked under his arm, tools of his trade. His name, if she recalled correctly, was Daniel, a storyteller with the distinct gift of capturing truth amidst the noise. "Mrs. Hawkins," he began, his tone respectful and earnest as he approached, stopping a respectful distance from where she stood. "I hope I'm not intruding." Beth offered him a smile of acknowledgement, a nod that permitted his time here. "Not at all, Daniel. A bit of company might just be welcome right now." "I watched what happened today," he said, his voice resonating with the echoes of the day's events still fresh in his mind. "Captured most of it, actually, and I thought you might have more to say. Something beyond just today." There was a warmth in his eyes, an understanding of the power of narrative, the kind that traveled through generations, touching hearts and minds alike. Beth considered his request, knowing the potential his inquiry held for wider dissemination and impact. Her story, both a personal saga and a broader commentary on systemic injustice, was in many ways the story of millions who came before and those who would follow. She took a deep breath, releasing it in a steady stream that seemed to carry away unexpressed burdens. "I've always believed we carry within us the echoes of those who came before, the voices of those long gone but never forgotten." Her words were measured and reflective, like pebbles dropping into a still pond, creating ripples that extended far beyond their initial entry point. Daniel nodded, the tip of his pen dancing lightly over paper, capturing each word with care. "And today? What does today mean for you, Mrs. Hawkins?" A light laugh escaped her, soft and tinged with the wisdom of years. "Today is a reminder," she began, each word underpinned by conviction, "that standing up, even when you're weary, is never in vain. It's about the push for justice that doesn't rest on any one shoulder alone. It's collective. It takes all of us." He watched her, the quiet strength she exuded an anchor amidst the relentless churn of societal tides. "I think people are ready, Beth," Daniel admitted, his admission an offering not just of hope but of faith in humanity's capacity for change. "Ready to listen, to learn, to act?" Beth turned her gaze towards the horizon, where the sky bled into hues of deep orange and gold. It was a palette of promise, nature's way of painting hope into the sky for all to witness. "I think you're right, Daniel, and that's what drives me. To know that tomorrow holds the potential for what today only began." Her voice was steady, the determination unyielding, a beacon poised to guide those adrift amid the churning seas of injustice. She didn't ask for the world to change in a day, nor for hearts to transform overnight, but she believed deeply in the cumulative power of countless small resistances. Every word spoken, every stand taken, contributed to the architecture of change they were slowly crafting together. Daniel clicked the shutter of his camera, capturing her against the backdrop of the setting sun, a silhouette carved into the lineage of history by the quiet yet relentless force of her spirit. When they parted ways, he carried with him the threads of her narrative, weaving them into a broader tapestry to share with a world in desperate need of such truths. Beth remained, silhouetted under the vast expanse of stars that began to prick the sky with their ancient brilliance, each one a reminder of untold stories of resilience and ongoing battles for justice. And it was here, in this space between fading daylight and the emergence of night, that she felt the fullness of her purpose realized. With her heart aligned to the rhythms of change, Beth stood ready to face whatever new dawn awaited, her spirit unwavering, her resolve as steady as the eternal march of time. Word had spread more swiftly than any had anticipated, merging with the winds of modern connection that knew no bounds. By the time another dawn awoke the town, Beth Hawkins's story had traversed vast distances, riding the crest of digital currents directly into the living rooms and laptops of a nation hungry for tales of perseverance and justice. News outlets had picked up the thread, their narrative spurred by the urgency of social media, where hashtags galvanized around her name like banners in a digital armory. Beth Hawkins, Navy SEAL hero, justice for all. The slogans were as varied as the people now engaging with her story, each retelling a promise of change yet to be fully realized. Beth sat quietly at her kitchen table, the fragrant aroma of morning coffee curling into the air like a barely discernible caress. Each sip brought with it a moment of reflection, sheltering her from the storm of attention that brewed beyond her front door. Her companion was a small, clipped article from a local reporter who'd caught the tail end of things, his words painting a hopeful picture of systemic reform ignited by her resolve. Outside, the world seemed to hum with newfound energy, the usual sounds of suburban life punctuated by news updates and the chatter of neighbors whose morning routines had transformed into conference sessions over impromptu fences. The phone startled her from her introspection, its shrill ring a jarring contrast against the peaceful backdrop. She answered, recognizing the voice of her eldest daughter, Sandra, warmth infused into every syllable. "Mom, you're all over the news," Sandra exclaimed, pride and shock jostling for dominance in her words. "People are really taking notice. Your story's everywhere." Beth smiled, the curve of her lips gentle, brimming with the love that only a mother's pride could hold. "Seems like the world has finally caught on, dear," she replied, her voice calm, an echo of the love she held for her family. Sandra's laughter was light, a soothing balm against the stark images of confrontation her mother had endured. "Finally! They'll know just how tough you are. I've been telling people for years," she teased gently. They shared a moment of comfortable silence, the kind only possible between those who shared an unspoken bond, built over years of shared joys and struggles. It was a silence that felt significant, a quiet acknowledgement from one generation to the next of the unyielding spirit required to persist against adversity. "I think it's time for us to do more than just talk, Sandra," Beth said after a pause, her tone shifting to one of determination. "People are listening now. We need to make sure the message stays clear and doesn't get washed away with the tide of the next big headline." Her daughter's agreement was immediate, their burdens shared across the miles between them. Sandra's voice, firm with purpose, echoed through the receiver. "We're with you, Mom, all the way." Beth's heart warmed with the promise of collective strength, a family united in their mission to ensure that the legacy of change was preserved, not just for them, but for countless others across the nation. It was a weight she carried with both pride and conscientious resolve. They talked a little longer, their conversation woven with sentiments of hope and strategy, until the world outside became more insistent, demanding Beth's return to the public narrative, unfolding with unstoppable momentum. The sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden glow over everything, as Beth allowed the calls to cascade in a whirling medley of voices eager to transform a singular act of quiet heroism into a rallying point for nationwide change. Journalists wanting interviews, invitations from universities and civil rights panels for her to speak, corporate teams inquiring about endorsements. Each voice added to a resonant chorus demanding to shine light on her experience, to capture it in stories they could tell and retell. Beth navigated these currents with grace, acknowledging that this newfound platform brought with it not just opportunity, but responsibility. A responsibility to guide the conversation toward actionable change, to ensure it remained not merely a flashpoint for interest, but the spark for long-term reform. Later that afternoon, seated in her cozy armchair by the window, Beth listened as the mailman made his way down the street. The familiar sound of envelopes slipping through her mail slot was a comfort against the more frenetic chaos of the world outside. Among the usual bills and circulars lay a package wrapped in simple brown paper, marked with no return address. There was a familiarity in the careful wrap that suggested the sender knew her well, yet the latent mystery carried with it the promise of something significant. And inside, her fingers brushed against a scrapbook, the pages filled with clippings and handwritten notes pieced together from earlier days, moments gilded with the kind of detail only a close friend or comrade could provide. One note stood out among the rest, in elegant script, familiar yet potent. "Beth, Keep fighting the good fight. The world needs you now more than ever. Your strength is our strength." She recognized the handwriting, memories flooding back of shared days and harrowing nights in distant lands. Its existence here, now, implied an unseen network of support that stretched far beyond the boundaries of time or distance. This reserve of solidarity filled her with warmth and wonder, strengthening her resolve and galvanizing this moment into lasting change, a change that would stretch across generations, lighting the path with the fire of justice and resilience. With renewed purpose, she set aside the scrapbook, the words between its pages guiding her as she rose to embrace whatever came next, ready to lend her voice and spirit to the ongoing symphony of collective action. Together, they would ensure that the echoes of one defiant stand would reverberate long into the future, inspiring those who followed to rise, speak, and be heard. Beyond the confines of Beth's comforting home, the ramifications of her stand rippled through the town and far beyond as the legal machinery began to stir. At the precinct headquarters, a different kind of tension permeated the air. Word of the incident had reached the ears of high-ranking officers and community leaders alike, setting off rounds of heated discussion and critical evaluations. Inside a stark conference room with fluorescent lights casting a sterile ambience, Captain Martin Thompson sat at the head of a long utilitarian table, a furrow deepening between his brows. Known for his pragmatic approach to leadership, he was a man who respected the uniform, yet was unafraid to hold it accountable. The latest event, involving one of his own, had become a catalyst for introspection that could no longer be ignored. Arrayed around him were senior officers and precinct staff, each holding papers and reports laden with accounts and testimonies from the previous day's confrontation. The atmosphere was one of contained urgency, alive with the knowledge that eyes from higher echelons scrutinized not just the incident itself, but the response to it. "Let's get down to the heart of this," Captain Thompson began, his deep voice resonating with a gravity that brooked no evasion. "What happened yesterday does not exist in a vacuum. It's part of a larger pattern we need to address." Lieutenant Sarah Carter, a woman whose own record was marked by a zealous dedication to reform, leaned forward, pointing to the report in front of her. "It's a case study of bias," she stated plainly, her directness cutting through any lingering defensiveness. "This isn't just about one officer. It's about systemic practices that allow such behaviors to manifest." The room shifted, anticipation growing as her words settled like sediment in still water. Captain Thompson heard her, felt the weight of her claims, and knew that any attempt to gloss over the reality they faced would be not just imprudent, but potentially destructive. Across the table, an officer raised an issue that had gnawed at the edges of their protocol discussions. "But what about the fallout? Officer Drake's actions, public perception, they're linked, but how do we navigate the balance between discipline and protecting our own integrity?" Silence followed his inquiry, charged with anticipation. It was a question born of both conscience and the burdens borne by those charged with public service. Behind it lay an implicit acknowledgement. This incident, if mishandled, could fracture community trust beyond repair. Captain Thompson steepled his fingers, mindful of the paths available to them. "Accountability," he declared, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "We're at a crossroads. We can either ignore this, which we've seen play out disastrously before, or we can confront it head-on." The room collectively exhaled, an unspoken agreement solidifying through nods and murmurs of concordance. They were good officers, striving to uphold a system designed for justice but tarnished by human fallibility. The road to true reform required more than platitudes. It required decisive action backed by courage. For the next hour, they delved into strategies that embraced transparency and rigorous retraining for their officers. The creation of panels, comprising both community members and external watchdogs, was proposed to evaluate conduct and ensure impartiality. Outside the precinct walls, rumors of the meeting's intent filtered through the town. Citizens who had watched the previous day's events unfold now waited anxiously to see if the promises of introspection would bear fruit. Legacy media captured the town's pulse, amplifying an expectant narrative that stretched out to audiences across the country, eager for progress embedded in concrete actions. By afternoon, the precinct released an official statement. Carefully worded but sincerely felt, it acknowledged the incident and outlined the steps to be taken. The plan was bold, a public commitment to transformation encompassing education sessions on bias, increased community involvement, and zero tolerance for discriminatory acts. Beth watched from home as local news outlets dissected the statement, their coverage a platform for voices that echoed both skepticism and hope. Interviews with community leaders, activists, and youth painted a complex aggregate of reactions, a canvas splashed with both cynicism born from past disappointments and eagerness for genuine change. In living rooms, coffee shops, and schools, discussions erupted, each one a microcosm of the larger conversation ignited by her stand. Families sat at tables debating what justice looked like. Educators crafted lessons around equality and respect, and digital forums buzzed with the energy of newly awakened activism. That evening, as she stepped outside to watch the sunset gilding the sky with its shade of fiery resolution, Beth felt a sense of fulfillment mingled with determination. The journey toward meaningful change was still fraught with obstacles and shadows, but the path was illuminated by the strength of numbers and the shared will found in collective voices. She thought of her comrades, both those she led in service and those she now walked beside in spirit, recognizing that while individuals could spark action, only the sustained chorus of unified effort could engrave justice into the fabric of the society they all inhabited. In this quiet moment under the expansive heavens, Beth understood that her legacy was more than an emblem of solitary defiance. It was a bridge to the future, paved with the endless potential of change, waiting to cradle the steps of generations yet to come. In the days following the precinct's announcement, an air of metamorphosis began to subtly weave itself through the community. What had begun as a confrontation in a sunlit parking lot was evolving into a movement, threaded by the determination of those ready to stand against long-standing prejudice. Beth Hawkins found herself at the center of this unprecedented wave, a reluctant yet potent symbol of resistance and hope. Her phone seemed to buzz incessantly, an unrelenting barrage of calls and messages from media outlets, supporters, and allies new and old, a symphony of voices harnessing the power of her story to fuel their own narratives. Among these voices emerged a particularly significant one, an organization dedicated to reinforcing the stories of unsung heroes, those who had slipped through the cracks of mainstream recognition. They called themselves the Quiet Valor Project, an initiative aimed at chronicling tales of resilience and bravery, often overshadowed by grander, louder tales of valor. Beth had agreed to meet with one of their representatives, a woman named Lisa Cheng who radiated a warmth that spoke to her sincerity. They met in a cozy cafe tucked into a bustling street, a quiet enclave amidst the surrounding currents of city life. Lisa arrived with a smile and a firm handshake, her presence unassuming yet defined by an aura of unwavering commitment. Her eyes sparkled with admiration as she took a seat opposite Beth, a recorder suddenly angled on the table between them. "What you've ignited here, Beth, is truly profound," Lisa began, her voice carrying an emphatic note. "And what the Quiet Valor Project aims to do is ensure your story, along with many others, gets the spotlight it deserves." Beth absorbed her words, contemplating the impact of contributing her journey to this collection of narratives. It was a testament to the everyman heroism that lay uncelebrated in many corners of the world, a resonant force that could mobilize and inspire. She nodded, a gentle smile accentuating her resolve. "If sharing my story can inspire even one person to stand up or hold strong, it's worth it." Lisa's expression softened, the recognition of shared purpose forming a bridge between them. "It's that very idea of standing together that we want to amplify," she added, her words imbued with a hopeful clarity. Individuals like you remind us that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the voice at the end of the day saying, "I will try again tomorrow." Their conversation unfolded like threads of tapestry being woven together, each anecdote and reflection a stitch that reinforced the narrative fabric. Beth spoke of her time in the Navy SEALs, her transition back into civilian life, and the myriad challenges that had tested her resolve. Together, they explored the broader systemic injustices she had faced and continued to confront, even now, as she watched a community learning to recalibrate its moral compass in the aftermath of unrest. As Beth spoke, Lisa found herself moved by the depth of story shared without embellishment, a reflection of honest fortitude that held within it the potential to shift perspectives, gradually realigning societal views towards honor and respect. After they parted, Lisa left with a deeper understanding of Beth's legacy and the collection of experiences she would carry into the Quiet Valor Project's broader narrative. Her enthusiasm was palpable as she visualized expanding their mission to shine a light on other hidden figures, often relegated to the shadows. Beth returned home, her steps lightened by the reciprocity that comes from collaborative vision and shared objectives. Her mind buzzed with the promise of untapped potential, and though the days were long and the path challenging, the unwavering light of future possibilities remained steadfast in her heart. The storm of attention that had swirled around her was beginning a transformation into something more sustainable. Grassroots organizations reached out to offer support, amplifying their shared messages of unity and advocacy for reform beyond the local level. Other veterans, inspired by Beth's resoluteness, formed networks that bridged military discipline with civilian movements, pooling their skills and strategies to orchestrate effective community action. It was a burgeoning network, a breathing tapestry of resilience, knit together by those who dared to defy injustice. In those quiet moments, as she sat by her small window overlooking the community she called home, Beth felt an overwhelming sense of possibility, of doors newly opened and paths yet traversed, unexplored but wholly attainable. Her narrative was not just a testimony of a single stand, but a beacon, urging others toward collective action, challenging them to uncover the valor residing within themselves, and that, above all else, was the path to true, enduring change. As the sun dipped below the horizon each night, casting its golden farewell across the sky, Beth Hawkins knew that tomorrow the fight would continue, fortified by the quiet echo of voices that refused to be silenced, each note a pledge, each word a promise, each life an exhibit of quiet valor rippling across time and space. The precinct's response to the incident had set wheels in motion, wheels that turned with a momentum only genuine accountability could sustain. Yet for Captain Martin Thompson, the challenge was not just in enacting change, but steering it through entrenched attitudes and long-standing practices that resisted evolution. Within the precinct, a palpable tension simmered. Staff meetings were thick with heated debates and quiet conversations exchanged in huddled corridors. The officer involved, struggling with the ghost of his actions, found himself facing pressures he had never anticipated, both from within the force and the wider community. In their efforts to uphold justice while preserving the integrity of the force, the captain and his leadership team had announced a comprehensive internal investigation. The process, designed to address potential biases and rebuild trust, was unprecedented in its transparency and scope. Yet, as with all transformations, the path was fraught with resistance. There were those who viewed the changes as unnecessary capitulations to public pressure rather than the necessary course corrections they actually signify. Captain Thompson, while navigating this intricate web of perspectives, understood the delicate tightrope he walked. He called a meeting, designed to address the concerns and resistance persisting within the ranks, determined to confront the whispers of dissent with a candid dialogue. The conference room, with its sterile walls and formidable echoes, filled once again with officers and administrative staff, each embodied by their own convictions and fears about the future. The atmosphere was heavy, anticipation threading through the room like an invisible conductor orchestrating an unscripted symphony. "Thank you all for gathering here," Captain Thompson began, his gaze sweeping over the diverse assembly, recognizing both allies and skeptics in every corner. "What brings us together today is a simple but fundamental truth. We have a responsibility to every member of this community to ensure our actions build trust, not erode it." The murmur that followed his words held a note of agreeableness. It was hard to argue against the mission he'd outlined. However, the true test lay in how they would choose to interpret and implement the ideals he spoke of. An officer seated midway down the table, Sergeant Harris, a respected veteran known for his candidness, leaned forward, deciding to voice what many seemed reluctant to utter. "Captain, we've all heard the chatter," he began, his tone exuding both respect and concern. "Some folks feel we're hanging one of our own out to dry. Morale's shaken. It seems like no matter what we do, it's never enough for the public." There it was, the sentiment underlying day-to-day stresses, the perception of being under siege, not just by external forces but by the very community they swore to protect. Captain Thompson acknowledged the comment with a nod, choosing his words carefully. "I understand the apprehensions you're feeling, but this isn't about pointing fingers or issuing blame without thought. It's about evolution and ensuring every interaction, every process, reflects the highest standards we can aspire to." His words resonated like a gentle yet steady drumbeat, and a thoughtful silence descended, during which many considered the broader impacts of cultural shifts. Lieutenant Sarah Carter, seated close to the captain, felt compelled to add her voice, her measured tone a salve to the charged atmosphere. "We have to remember that change is uncomfortable, but this moment, this opportunity, is about aligning our actions with our deepest values. Isn't that what we signed up for?" The room seemed to absorb her sentiments, different reactions scattering like light upon a prism, each officer processing her words through their own unique lens. Then, unexpectedly, Officer Drake, the very individual at the heart of the incident, stood from his seat at the back, his presence electrifying the room into immediate silence. He tugged at the collar of his uniform, a gesture of discomfort that bespoke the inner reflection stirring within him. "Look, I won't lie," he started, his voice raw and unguarded. "I screwed up, and I've spent every waking minute since then trying to understand just where I lost my way. Maybe this whole uproar is what I needed, what we all need, to take a different path." His confession hung in the air like a solemn proclamation, unexpected yet profound in its vulnerability. In the face of his admission, walls erected by fear and presumption seemed to dissolve, leaving behind a hope that transcended surface-level sympathies. The others reacted slowly, as though testing the safety of newly thawed ground. But as they did, voices began to rise, cautiously at first, and then with tangible energy. Dialogue flowed, earnest and untethered, as colleagues shared both reservations and aspirations for the future of the force. Captain Thompson observed their transformation with a mixture of relief and gratitude, recognizing the maturation of trust blossomed from this shared understanding. The conversation wasn't just a meeting, it was the first uninhibited step toward the holistic change he'd envisioned for their precinct. And as the meeting wound to a close, the lines of division softened, giving way to a systemic road forward designed not only to rectify but to elevate, paving the way for a new era of justice aligned with humanity's core for this community and for Beth Hawkins, whose witness had become the catalyst for this necessary introspection. This dialogue represented a victory beyond mere justice. It was unity actualized, an assertion of the immeasurable strength found when shared dignity creates a fertile ground for reform. As the precinct grappled with change and the town found itself in the midst of a quiet transformation, Beth Hawkins became an unexpected herald for broader conversations around race, resilience, and the power of unseen stories. The incident had propelled her into the limelight, but it was the quieter moments that had a profound impact on her journey. One afternoon, during a rare respite from the whirlwind of public engagements, Beth received a letter. Its old-fashioned envelope, a nostalgic contrast to the digital noise that had enveloped her life in recent days. The handwriting was neat and unfamiliar, yet there was a tangible sincerity in every stroke. As she opened the envelope, a single page slipped into her hands, covered in flowing script that seemed to echo whispers from another era. Dear Ms. Hawkins, I hope this letter finds you well. You don't know me, but your story has reached my ears and awakened something that has lain dormant in my own heart for many years. I too once served, though not alongside you in battles fought overseas, but here, quietly, within the shadows of a system I have loved yet struggled to change. Your recent stand, not of aggression but of dignified defiance, struck a chord, as if you were playing the notes I've longed to hear. It is time, I've realized, to join voices like yours in a chorus for change. Thank you for sparking a flame where there was once only a dim glow. Please know that you do not stand alone. With deepest respect and solidarity, fellow traveler in justice. Beth sat with the letter cradled in her hands, the weight of its words steeped in the warmth of shared connection. Her eyes traced the lines again, the sentiment woven into its fabric illuminating the path she had chosen, reaffirming the collective journey it had unveiled. Who, she wondered, was the mysterious correspondent whose spirit resonated so profoundly with her own? The letter's existence was a testament to the silent allies woven throughout the tapestry of this nation's consciousness, a network of hearts ready to forge paths untraveled, emboldened by her stand. This letter was not alone. In the days that followed, similar missives appeared, some tucked into her mailbox, others slipped quietly beneath her door. Each bore stories of both triumph and struggle, echoing with voices eager to join in the collective symphony of action. Beth made a decision. This growing collection of letters would become something more, a documented anthology of voices rallying for justice, each reflective of the values she held dear. They would be shared, perhaps at a public reading or published together, a beacon illuminating the power of community and empathy. The notion of such an anthology invigorated her, the project becoming both challenge and mission. It was as if the letters themselves whispered for her to step further into her role as a storyteller, not of solitary legend, but of a shared narrative, each fragment adding depth and color to the greater story of transformation. Firm in her resolve, Beth began planning a gathering, a night of shared stories, music, and reflection. She envisioned it in a small local theater, every seat filled with individuals ready to listen, to engage, to be stirred into action. It was to be a communion of spirits, united by the bonds of shared purpose and truth. Her daughter Sandra, with her innate organizational skills and network, readily agreed to assist. Calls and arrangements soon carried her vision into reality, ensuring every detail resonated with intention and care. As the letters continued to arrive, filling her heart with a chorus of support, Beth realized just how expansive this journey had become. It was no longer contained to the bounds of her local community or the media that amplified her story. It had spiraled outward, like concentric ripples across a vast pond. On the eve of the proposed gathering, Beth sat at her kitchen table under the gentle glow of a single lamp. Before her lay a freshly penned letter of her own, a response to those who'd entrusted their words to her, an invitation to contribute to a new narrative of hope, resilience, and reform. As she sealed the envelope, her heart once again light with possibility. Beth knew that what lay ahead was not simply the culmination of a confrontation in a parking lot, it was the birth of a movement, one hand-held heart to heart, encompassing all who dared to dream of a world unmarred by prejudice. Determined and steadfast, she retired for the night, content in the knowledge that tomorrow promised not just change, but a symphony of voices rising in the name of justice, each note reaching toward a harmonious world where acceptance and equality were not luxuries, but inherent rights. The evening of the gathering arrived with an electric anticipation, the small theater now a haven for those drawn by the resonance of Beth Hawkins's story and the promise of shared narratives. Outside, shadows stretched across the streets, embracing the incoming tide of voices eager to transform whispers into song. Inside, the atmosphere was infused with warmth and camaraderie, the gentle hum of conversation filling the space as people settled into their seats. The stage was simple, adorned with a single microphone and a chair, an open invitation to anyone willing to share their story. Beth stood backstage, her heart thrumming with the energy of the crowd and the significance of the moment. Sandra, beside her, squeezed her hand, her presence a comforting anchor in the sea of new experiences. With a deep breath, Beth stepped forward into the gentle glow of the stage lights, greeted by a round of applause that felt as much a welcome as a rallying cry. She paused, allowing herself a moment to absorb the presence of every individual gathered, faces illuminated with the shared intent of listening and being heard. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Beth began, her voice full, confident, carrying the weight of both her story and the many she now cradled. "We come together not just to tell tales, but to listen and to learn, to weave our stories into a fabric of understanding and change." The crowd responded with an eagerness that sent pulses of anticipation through the theater. Beth reached into a basket beside her, drawing out a letter, the first of many she planned to share, each one a testament to the quiet valor that often goes unnoticed, yet fuels the collective push for justice. As she read, the words echoed through the theater, each sentence charged with the sincerity of its author, a veteran who had served alongside diverse comrades, each one sharing their experiences of inequality and the bonds they forged in defiance of such barriers. The audience listened intently, their reactions visible, nodding in affirmation, murmuring agreement, forming a tapestry of empathy that enveloped the room. As the letter concluded, the applause was immediate and heartfelt, a tribute to the courage of speaking one's truth. One by one, stories emerged from the crowd. A young woman stepped forward to share her fight for equal rights within the bureaucratic labyrinth of corporate life. An elderly man recounted a childhood fraught with racial prejudice and the battles of the civil rights movement that had shaped him. Each narrative added a layer to the evening's purpose. The theater transformed into a sacred space where transgressions of the past mingled with the possibilities of the future. Lisa Chang, from the Quiet Valor Project, was among the audience, taking diligent notes. Her eyes shone with the knowledge that this evening would not end here, that these stories would join a nationwide chorus strong enough to push boundaries and inspire action. As each participant spoke, the air thickened with hope and resolve, the energy almost visible, a current of unity binding them together. There was laughter, tears, applause, so much applause, each response a promise of support for those who dared to speak. Beth, heartened by their courage, returned to the stage intermittently, reading letters that spoke to the collective struggle and triumphs experienced by minorities across diverse fields. Letters expressing the exhaustion of daily prejudice, yet defying despair with each resilient beat. Between tales, musicians took the stage, offering songs of hope and perseverance that encouraged every heart to keep on, even when shadows loomed large. The music wove through the voices like a balm, binding them in a shared rhythm of defiance and grace. As the evening drew to a close, the participants sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of what they had shared and witnessed. It was a sacred stillness, rich with the wisdom of countless lifetimes, intersecting in that single room. Beth felt the weight of words unsaid and promises made touch every fiber of her being, aware that this was just the beginning, an open door leading to a path carved by the footsteps of those willing to venture forth. With gratitude and purpose, she stepped forward one last time, her presence speaking to the collective spirit they had kindled together. "Tonight isn't an end," she declared, her voice resonating with every truth revealed. "It's a spark, an invitation to carry these stories, this truth, into the days, months, and years to come." Her words lingered, a gentle echo that promised action beyond the confines of the theater, urging every individual present to contribute their own notes to the song of justice that they had begun together. As people prepared to leave, many approached Beth, offering their thanks and assurances of continued support and activism. Each handshake, each embrace, solidified in her mind the power they possessed, individually and collectively, to effect change, and to do so with courage and kindness. In the darkness outside, under the vast dome of stars, Beth felt her heart swell with hope and certainty. Together, they were crafting a future brightened by understanding and compassion, a future where justice would not merely be an ideal, but a living reality. And as the night stretched on, she carried the light of that gathering, the voices and the dreams ignited, ready to illuminate whatever lies ahead with the unwavering torch of unity and shared humanity. In the weeks that followed the gathering, the community teemed with a vibrant, renewed energy. Conversations that began on that illuminating evening rippled through the town, each dialogue a building block of a larger movement toward accountability and reform. Beth Hawkins observed these developments with a profound sense of pride and purpose, knowing that the night of stories had planted seeds now blossoming into community action. Neighborhoods that had once been distant, separated by invisible boundaries, found themselves entwined in mutual challenges and goals. Local forums emerged both online and in physical spaces, where citizens shared their experiences and ideas on how to address racial profiling, expand education on equality, and foster inclusivity. One particular group that burgeoned out of this collective momentum was the Unity Council, a grassroots initiative composed of diverse individuals united by a shared dedication to bridge divides and strengthen community bonds. They met regularly in a local community center, the air alight with the kind of fervor only possible in those committed to forging change through dialogue and action. At one such meeting, Beth found herself enveloped in the warmth of a room filled with familiar faces. Faces she had come to recognize not just as voices, but as allies. The gathering was casual yet driven, with people sitting on folding chairs arranged in a large circle to encourage openness and equality. Lisa Cheng was there, capturing the ongoing evolution of advocacy sparked by Beth's story for the Quiet Valor Project. Beside her sat Clarence Thompson, whose presence lent a layer of gravitas to the discussions, his experience in law serving as an invaluable compass for the council's legal outreach and initiatives. The facilitator for the evening was a dynamic young teacher named Jamal, whose passion for educating the next generation was matched only by his commitment to seeing tangible reform. As he welcomed everyone, his words tingled with enthusiasm and determination. "Welcome, everyone. Our momentum is growing thanks to all of you who continue to dedicate time and effort in countless ways," Jamal began, his gaze encompassing both new members and seasoned participants alike. "Tonight, let's focus on marking out key areas we want to target, areas where we can make the biggest impact immediately." Around the circle, heads nodded, faces alight with determination. The discussions were aimed at identifying systemic issues and mapping solutions that were not just aspirational, but attainable through collective effort. Among the initial topics raised was the necessity for stronger educational programs in schools that foster awareness and thoughtful discourse on racism and inclusion. Teachers and students had begun to see the ripple effects of Beth's story firsthand, and many were eager to further institutionalize these positive changes. Sarah Finn, a high school student who had attended Beth's storytelling event, spoke up with conviction. "We've started a diversity club at school, but we need more support, more resources to educate and involve," she said, her youthful optimism infectious. The council quickly embraced the idea, pledging to assist in creating workshops and resource nights designed to integrate learning with real-world applications. Also high on the agenda was the push for transparency in the police department's practices, not as an attack on law enforcement, but as a crucial step toward rebuilding trust. Capturing this conversational thread, Clarence offered insights from the precinct's internal changes, sharing updates on the reinstitution of community policing initiatives designed to foster dialogue and mutual respect between officers and residents. Seeing the corrective action from the police department, Clarence offered insights on why officers and the key, Clarence emphasized, is empathy. It's about seeing each other as allies, recognizing shared humanity beyond uniform and past grievances. The dialogue was robust, tackling everything from housing inequalities to access to mental health resources. The ideas flowed freely, each suggestion building upon the previous, forming a mosaic of goals the council aimed to achieve in the coming months. Beth listened, partook, and participated, her presence a steadying force amid the vibrant cacophony of energy and resolve. She understood that her role was not to lead every initiative, but to act as a fulcrum, a reminder that every voice contributes to the chorus, demanding and constructing change. As the meeting wound to a close, Jamal encouraged everyone present to remain engaged, stating passionately, "This is our chance to write the future we want to see, a future where justice isn't just an ideal, but a foundation." Applause erupted, a tangible manifestation of the community's collective commitment to being architects of their destiny. Each pair of hands united in claps symbolized allyship, the sound ricocheting off the walls as a defiant echo of shared determination. As attendees began to disperse, exchanging contact information and brainstorming ideas, Beth remained for a moment longer, her eyes scanning the room, her heart anchored firmly in gratitude. He left the meeting with renewed vigor, joined by Sandra and Clarence, the night's tranquility a canvas upon which the day's hopefulness painted its final strokes. Under the starry night's embrace, they marveled at the promise of their ongoing journey, the burgeoning belief that in unity lay unimaginable strength and in shared dreams, the blueprint for genuine, lasting reform. Together, they understood that there would be setbacks, moments of doubt, but as long as individuals dared to dream, to speak out, and to work tirelessly for justice, change was not only possible, it was inevitable. Through the quiet night, Beth led them forward, fueled by the powerful realization that their story, joined with so many others, was already reshaping the dawn. The murmurs of transformation that had taken root within the community were gradually forging their way into the larger discourse of the region, becoming a topic of state-level conversations around policy and systemic reform. With every meeting convened and dialogue fostered, the reverberations grew stronger, shaking the foundations of long-held indifference to core issues of race and justice. Within the precinct walls, Officer Drake confronted a moment of reckoning, standing at the crossroads of personal evolution and professional accountability. The internal investigation had reached its verdict, and he found himself called to a meeting. What lay ahead was both consequence and opportunity. The atmosphere in the conference room was weighty with anticipation and the promise of resolution. Seated behind the formidable oak table was Captain Martin Thompson, flanked by members of the precinct's Oversight Committee, a group formed to ensure impartiality in such processes. Drake entered with measured steps, the gravity of his missteps since that fateful day casting a long shadow upon his resolve. He'd grappled with the reality of his actions, processing their impact not only on Beth Hawkins, but on the symbolic nature they held in the hearts of those who witnessed it. "Officer Drake," the captain began, his voice filling the space with a calm yet unwavering authority, "we're here not just to address past behaviors, but to determine the path forward. For you, for this precinct, and for the community we serve." Drake nodded, gratitude mixed with the weight of uncertainty as he faced the panel. "I've thought a lot about what happened," he admitted, his voice a quiet ripple in the silent room. "And I acknowledge the misjudgment I made, how I allowed bias to dictate my action rather than fairness and respect." His admission was sincere, colored by the countless hours spent in introspection, shadowed by a need for redemption. It resonated with those present, many of whom had witnessed Drake's dismay and subsequent efforts to understand his actions. "We appreciate your honesty, Drake," Captain Thompson continued, sincerity reflecting in his gaze. "The purpose of this oversight is to not only issue corrective measures, but to guide toward genuine growth. The question now is how you intend to contribute, not only to your own rehabilitation, but the renewal of public trust." The room held its collective breath. It was a statement that required more than platitudes. It necessitated plans fortified by authentic commitment. Drake stood silent for a moment, gathering his words along with the courage that had hitherto eluded him. "Education," he started, determination mingling with his words. "I want to participate in the bias training programs we're implementing and become a facilitator myself, use my experience to help others see what I failed to understand." This resolve, born of introspection, promised a bridge to a future where lessons learned could light the way for others navigating similar waters. It was a path toward transformation, not just for Drake, but for the institution he represented. The Oversight Committee exchanged looks, their expressions softening in acknowledgement of potential not just for redemption, but for genuine change within the force's culture. Captain Thompson nodded, approval and determination etched into his features. "That's a start. It's critical we support efforts that align with our goal of comprehensive reform. Facilitating understanding and empathy will be instrumental in our evolution as a unit dedicated to equity." The session concluded with a plan. Drake would begin his journey into rehabilitation by engaging deeply in community service, partnering with local outreach programs designed to bridge gaps between law enforcement and those they served. His eyes reflecting newfound resolve, Drake exited the meeting room with a clearer purpose. Outside, the precinct was bustling with activity, the same old routines, but now infused with a spirit of renewal and accountability. "Is it fair that we forced you in and threatened to beat you up to make you..." Elsewhere in town, the initiatives born from the Unity Council and the gatherings led by Beth Hawkins continued to gain momentum. The council had garnered recognition for their restorative dialogues. Their meetings evolved into workshops and community mobilizations, targeting issues from housing disparities to educational inequities. These blossoms of hope attracted attention beyond the local scope, with regional leaders reaching out, intrigued by the peaceful yet powerful methods being employed to foster understanding and eliminate systemic prejudice. Beth, whose story had cast light into the dim corners of bias, watched with a mixture of humility and fulfillment. The efforts this small community made were echoing not just across the region, but capturing the attention of those who held sway over broader policies and standards. Through countless small actions, each fueled by genuine intent and a commitment to inclusion, they were rewriting the narrative, transforming old paradigms of division into blueprints for unity and justice. As spring's warmth began to thaw away winter's cold, Beth found herself engrossed in the blooms of progress, propelled by hearts and hands united in purpose. With sunsets serving as her backdrop, she remained vigilant, ever aware of the road ahead, but reassured by the strength in numbers that journeyed alongside her. It was a labor of love, one that required constant facilitation and reaffirmation, but held fast the knowledge that justice, once awakened, could not be laid to rest. The movement, born in a simple parking lot confrontation, had become an unstoppable force, infusing hope, concrete action, and enduring change within every corner of their shared world. As the community continued to evolve into a beacon of resilience and reform, Beth Hawkins' story transcended her town, capturing the attention of storytellers, activists, and everyday champions of justice. Her journey, and the movements it inspired, resonated with people across the nation, becoming a fixture in discussions about progress and equality. The change was palpable in the town, where newfound unity was not just a concept but a daily practice. Murals celebrating diversity sprang up on walls that once reflected neglect, while gardens and community spaces flourished under the tender ministrations of people working hand in hand, their collaborative efforts shaping a landscape of inclusion and empathy. Through this blossoming of community spirit, the voice of Beth Hawkins became a guiding light. She was invited to speak at colleges, in community centers, and at conferences where the stories she shared enthralled audiences eager to learn from her experience. She became not just a symbol of change, but an embodiment of resilience and quiet, undeterred strength. It was at one such conference, an event focused on community reform and leadership, that Beth found herself standing on a stage before a packed auditorium. The room thrummed with anticipation as attendees, diverse in background and experience, leaned forward, ready to absorb the insight of a woman who had transformed struggle into a catalyst for transformation. As the spotlight illuminated her face, Beth drew in a breath, taking in the convergence of lives and perspectives gathered before her. "Thank you for the warm welcome," she began, her voice steady, calm, harboring the weight of wisdom and lived experience. "We are here today because we recognize the power of shared stories in driving meaningful change. My story is but one thread in this rich tapestry, woven with countless other voices joining together for collective impact." She paused, allowing the sentiment to settle, a seed planted in the fertile minds of those present. What started as a moment of confrontation has grown into an era of conversations and actions, each step guided by the need for mutual respect and shared understanding. Her address carried the room through the valleys and peaks of her journey, detailing not just the challenges, but the incremental victories sown through the actions of her community. She spoke of the council initiatives, the precinct's transformation, and most importantly, of the people, individuals whose once silent voices now roared with clarity and purpose. Real change, she continued, doesn't come from a single action or lone voice. It emerges when communities come together, when every individual realizes they have the power to affect change, not just for themselves, but for future generations. Her words funneled inspiration into the auditorium, filling the space with a palpable vigor, a reminder that the present was fertile ground for growing justice. In the exchange that followed her talk, audience members approached her with their own stories, tales of overcoming, of struggle mirroring hers, but localized and uniquely flavored by personal experiences. It was a melting pot of determination, each person an agent of change in their own right. One young activist, her eyes bright with hope, approached Beth with palpable gratitude. "Your story taught me to use my voice," she confided, her voice trembling with the rawness of truth. "It's given me courage to address disparities in my own community." Beth, her heart swelling with the familiar cadence of solidarity and mentorship, leaned forward, an encouraging hand resting on the young woman's shoulder. "Each voice lifted strengthens ours. Together, we are unstoppable." The conference concluded with a resilient spirit of unity that attendees would carry back to their respective corners of the world, emboldened by the collective knowledge and stories shared. Meanwhile, back in Beth's town, the metamorphosis she had championed continued apace, a living testament to what was possible when courage met action. Schools re-examined curriculums, ensuring inclusivity. Neighborhood watches were redefined to protect and unite rather than intimidate or isolate. This new way of life influenced not just policy but mindset, reshaping what community looked and felt like from the grassroots up. The narratives forged in conversations under the spreading oaks, over kitchen tables, and within town halls left indelible prints on the broader canvas of societal potential. In quieter moments, Beth reflected on all that had transpired, her heart steady with the knowledge that what they had built together would endure. The ripple effect of her stand was unceasing, its influence transforming everything it touched, proof that history's course when directed by understanding and compassion, could be continually rewritten. As seasons turned, Beth Hawkins remained a steadfast guardian of this ongoing journey, ever vigilant, heartened by the knowledge that unity, once awakened, could not be easily extinguished. The world around her echoed with possibilities, each day a new opportunity to advance the song of justice and shared humanity, a melody that promised to resonate through time, unyielding and eternal. As the transformative power of Beth Hawkins's story rippled further outward, it began to draw unexpected allies from corners often considered inhospitable. Within the police department itself, a shift had begun to crystallize, not merely from external pressure, but through internal awakening sparked by those who wore the uniform and desired to redefine its narrative. Enter Lieutenant Ian Monroe, an officer known for his quiet integrity and a deep-seated conviction that his duty was to serve and protect, not just enforce. Inspired by Beth's journey and impelled by the precinct's introspections, Monroe realized the time had come to bridge gaps from within, starting with the officers themselves. Monroe was no stranger to the challenges of crossing divides. His upbringing, melded with experiences from years of service in diverse communities, had taught him the intrinsic value of empathy in policing. Now, as the precinct stood at this pivotal juncture, he saw a unique opportunity to catalyze positive change. One afternoon, Monroe decided to act. He gathered a group of officers in the precinct's lecture hall, a wide room that now served as a gateway to new ideas and open dialogue. The attendees were a mix: seasoned veterans with deep lines etched by time's passage, and young recruits, ideals still fresh and unweathered. In the hushed ambience, Monroe stepped forward, his presence a calm ripple in the anticipatory silence. "Thank you for joining me," he began, his voice imbued with the authority of experience, tempered by humility. "We're here today not to indict our past practices, but to reinvent them." The officers listened intently, curiosity piqued by both the intent and the leader before them. Monroe continued, "We have a unique chance to redefine what policing looks like in our community, and it starts with understanding." He gestured toward a projection screen behind him, where a map of the town appeared, each district highlighted, each sector a canvas for future progress. Every street, every home, they're not just areas on a map. They're filled with stories, with people who feel hope and hurt just like us. His words painted pictures across the room, turning abstract statistics into the faces and lives officers encountered daily. An undercurrent of connection began to weave through the group, each officer recognizing the humanity that often lay hidden behind badges and mandates. Monroe introduced an initiative he called Storylines. It was a simple concept. Officers would spend part of their shifts engaging directly with community members. They would participate in story exchanges, listening, learning, and sharing personal histories to foster mutual understanding and diminish misconception. As he detailed the plan, emphasizing its voluntary nature, faces around the room shifted from skepticism to interest. It was as if Monroe held a key, unlocking doorways to relationships they hadn't realized they needed or could achieve. "Imagine what we could do if every officer knew the stories of the people they served," he said, his voice rising with conviction. "If we understood the fears, the dreams, the histories behind every door." The room buzzed with newfound energy, the sound of possibilities unfurling like flags of hope waved by unseen hands. In the subsequent discussion, ideas sparked like flint on steel, igniting proposals from ride-alongs to town hall participation, each intended to bring officer and civilian into a shared narrative space. Among the voices was Officer Drake, his recent journey of rehabilitation granting him fresh perspective. "We talk about putting ourselves in the shoes of others," he admitted candidly, "but rarely do we slip them on and walk a mile. Maybe it's time we actually do." His statement, a reflection of humility and understanding, rippled through the room, fortifying the collective resolve. Monroe acknowledged Drake's journey, nodding with approval, aware that his willingness to speak so openly was not just a step for him, but a leap for those listening. As the session transitioned into group breakouts, officers engaged with scenarios drawn from both positive and negative interactions within the community. These dialogues, facilitated by external advocates and allies, peeled back layers of misunderstanding, laying foundations upon which bridges could rise. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, news of these efforts began to circulate, nurturing the tenuous blooms of trust that Beth's actions had sowed. Community members, once skeptical, offered reserved optimism, eager to see if these internal dialogues would translate into external action. Beth herself was heartened by the unfolding changes. The story she had started was being rewritten in broader, bolder scripts that included complex perspectives from both sides of the blue line. She saw the influence of these shifts in the small things: neighbors engaging more openly with officers, children waving to police cars with curiosity instead of apprehension, together with familiar allies Clarence, Sandra, Lisa, and so many others. She continued to support and drive discussions that fueled these initiatives, knowing that each step taken was a stride toward a future where fear could be supplanted by understanding, apathy replaced by action. As new alliances grew, rooted in mutual respect and shared aspirations, Beth understood that this was not merely a flash of progress to be enjoyed fleetingly. It was, instead, a tapestry of incremental victories, one woven together robustly enough to withstand the winds of uncertainty and change. In the heart of their mutual journey towards justice, Beth knew their collective narrative was not forged in the absence of challenges, but through them, every triumph building upon the last, ensuring that together they marched forward into a dawn of hope and shared purpose. As the fabric of the community's transformation continued to stitch itself tighter, each thread representing a shared story of struggle and change, the Unity Council found its footing as a powerful catalyst for enduring reform. With each meeting, they carved out paths of advocacy designed to heal the fractures of misunderstanding, bringing those in power to the table where voices once scattered now converged as a resonant chorus of demand for justice. Through the efforts of the council and allies like Beth, the topic of police reform grew into a regional conversation, attracting the attention of policymakers and state legislators. These discussions no longer lived in the shadows of whispered fears or tentative hope. They were thrust into the spotlight, demanding attention and meaningful action. In response, propositions for legislative measures began to take shape, initiatives built on the foundation of accountability, transparency, and community integration. Among these proposals was a groundbreaking bill aimed to restructure police training, emphasizing de-escalation tactics, mental health awareness, and cultural sensitivity. It was a comprehensive plan that sought not just policing in action, but policing in understanding. Beth, alongside Clarence and other council members, was invited to join a task force comprised of community leaders, legal experts, and police representatives. Their mission: to craft and advocate for measures that would entwine the justice system with the principles of equality and respect that the community had fought so hard to elevate. In one such task force meeting, held in the state capitol far from their familiar town, Beth felt the weight of history pressing in from the grandiosity of the room's massive oak furnishings and the echo of legends whose echoes still whispered from the mahogany walls. It was a room where deals were brokered, where futures were decided, a room that now cradled the possibility for radical transformation. As the meeting convened, the air rippled with anticipation. Lawmakers, activists, and members of the public intermingled in aligned purpose, the energy a quiet storm of intent, poised to remake the facets of governance that had long resisted change. A state senator, a longtime champion for civil rights, started proceedings with an encouraging nod towards Beth. "Today is about aligning action with our stated values," she said, her voice firm with the authority of one who had weathered many a political storm. "Thanks to voices like Ms. Hawkins, we've seen firsthand what community-driven change can look like." Beth, momentarily the focus of all eyes, nodded in acknowledgement, her heart beating a little faster with the knowledge that the journey till now was not in vain, but a prelude to greater achievements. What followed was a robust series of discussions where ideas met resistance and reform met reality. Clarence, with his legal acumen, presented the council's findings and recommendations, emphasizing the necessity of rapid implementation, not just due to rising public demand, but because it was simply the right thing to do. The crux of these proposals centered around establishing a civilian oversight committee to review police activities, a body capable of rendering unbiased assessments and advocating for victims of police misconduct. This committee would foster an environment where accountability was not punitive but transformative. The debates were intense, pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo. Yet beneath it all was a pulsation of unity, each member aware that despite differing opinions, their collective goal remained singular, justice infused with empathy. As the day waned, a preliminary vote showed promising support, a testament to their efforts and the momentum of Beth's influence. Yet as they left the room, she understood fully that lasting reform required vigilance and unyielding commitment, a continuous journey rather than a destination reached. Back in her town, the initiatives launched by the Unity Council continued to bear fruit. Educational outreach extended into neighboring communities, their frameworks adopted with enthusiasm by those eager to replicate success in their struggles against the systemic issues plaguing their own institutions. Arts and culture surged into public space, molding perceptions with empathy-driven narratives expressed through song, performance, and visual artistry. It was a renaissance not just of art but of thought, a flowering of sensitivity that challenged community members to look beyond their biases and shape a sanctuary of acceptance. Beth, alongside her steadfast companions, continued to champion these advances, ensuring that the unity they fostered galvanized individuals to push for change with renewed vigor and purpose. Together, they embraced the knowledge that their collective narratives formed part of a legacy not simply claimed by a single event or voice, but a culmination of countless actions, both quiet and loud. Onward they journeyed, each step marked by the firm belief that change, once initiated, could be nurtured and grown into an unstoppable movement. The light they shared shined brightly against the shadow of systemic injustice, promising a tomorrow where justice was a certainty, not a question. In this evolution, Beth knew that their struggles and victories were shared, every story, every voice carving its place into the greater whole, and through it all she remained its unwavering custodian, preserving a collective memory illuminated by the hope that powered their hearts and ignited their future. As the days turned into weeks, the movement for reform that Beth Hawkins catalyzed matured into a powerful force, inspiring similar efforts across the nation. Towns once silenced by inaction found themselves invigorated by the possibility of change, each community a microcosm reflecting the larger tapestry of justice they all labored to create. In the heart of this movement, Beth stood as a beacon, not for notoriety, but because her quiet resolve encapsulated the very essence of what it meant to persevere against the odds. Her presence reassured those on the front lines of change, reminding them that even the smallest acts of courage could have ripples far beyond their immediate effects. One quiet morning, Beth found herself wandering through a local park, a rare moment of solitude amidst the tide of engagements and responsibilities. The air was crisp with the promise of early summer, the trees alive with the chatter of birds whose melodies accompanied her thoughts. As Beth walked, each step was a meditation on paths traveled and those yet to unfold. She heard laughter and the delighted shrieks of children playing on the vibrant jungle gym, an oasis of innocence reminding her why the fight was necessary, an investment in their futures as much as it was acknowledgement of past wrongs. Lost in contemplation, a familiar voice drew her back to the present. It was her dear comrade, Clarence, his smile broad and welcoming as he approached from a sun-dappled path lined with wildflowers, stretching toward the sky. a testament to nature's resilience mirrored in their shared struggles. "These grounds look different, don't they?" Clarence observed, his gaze sweeping over the landscape. The park, once a neglected pocket, now a flourishing hub of community life. Beth nodded, her eyes alight with a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. "In so many ways, everything's changed," she replied, "and yet the essence remains the same, people banding together, guided by a sense of what's right." Their conversation meandered through topics of current initiatives and future goals, reflecting on the lives touched and the future carved through unity. Clarence spoke of the latest achievements of the Unity Council, each story a testament to collective resolve. As they walked, other familiar faces appeared. Sarah, the teacher turned advocate, whose fiery dedication ignited students' passions for social equity, and Jamal, the young leader who channeled his energy into empowering communities with education and activism. The impromptu gathering became an exchange of ideas, a shared understanding that their efforts were far from complete. They each carried the torch of determination, their paths intersecting like streams flowing into a singular river of hope and progress, an emblem of the power in collective action. Sarah recounted an anecdote from a recent school event, a history fair reimagined to include the stories of local figures who had shaped civil rights narratives. Students were enraptured, she said, when they learned that change began with individuals who refused to relent in their pursuit of justice. "It's like watering seeds." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with hope. "These kids are learning to be gardeners of change." Nearby, Jamal echoed her sentiment, his words sharp with optimism. "It's not just about today. It's about building skills, nurturing empathy, crafting an environment where everyone's voice is not just heard but celebrated." Their words resonated with Beth deeply, eliciting a warmth that spread through her chest, a gentle, reaffirming fire. In them she saw the continuity of purpose, a dedication she believed in and fought for despite the challenges they faced. As the group continued their stroll through the park, they encountered patches of vivid blossoms, each flower a testament to nature's cycles of growth and renewal, a reminder that these principles of patience and care were reflected in the paths they walked together. Beth watched her companions, young and old, as they animatedly discussed strategies for further outreach programs and community-building activities. Each voice added depth to their shared mission, shaping plans that would usher in more inclusive practices within both governance and daily life. In this oasis of connection, Beth understood that while she had become a symbol of resistance and change, it was the countless unnamed individuals, the unsung heroes, who stitched together the tapestry of progress, ensuring its pattern wove strong, vibrant, and permanent. As they parted ways, the sun began its descent towards the horizon, casting rays that filtered warmly through the leaves. Beth stood a moment longer, absorbing the vitality of the day and the happenings they had set in motion, a silent participant in the unfolding scene of hope and unity. For in the end, the fight for justice was not confined to monumental victories but lay in the threads woven through everyday acts of courage and compassion. Together, as allies and friends, they fulfilled the promise of progress, the melody of their movement resonating through the heart of time, a reminder that they were more than the sum of their efforts. They were the architects of a new world, steadfast and unapologetically hopeful. On a quiet evening back in her cozy home, with the sun having melted into ribbons of violet and gold on the horizon, Beth Hawkins found herself in the comforting glow of old camaraderie. Her doorbell echoed softly, heralding the arrival of a visitor she had not seen in many years, a fellow comrade from her days in the Navy SEALs, Kurt Daniels. Kurt had been an anchor for her in those years of high tides and low ebbs, his presence solid in the chaos of missions and the shared solitude of their war-bonded experience. Time had etched lines of wisdom across his rugged face, but the old warmth shone through as he stepped inside, his smile a door thrown open to the past. "Brought you something," he said with a lopsided grin, extending a bottle of wine clutched in one hand, a gesture as familiar as their friendship. Beth took it with a grateful nod, leading him into the kitchen where they settled around the sturdy oak table, its surface populated with letters and notes she'd been compiling for her community's ongoing projects. The room was filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the distant echoes of shared battles and victories past. Over glasses of wine that turned from full to empty in no time at all, they slipped into conversation that ebbed and flowed, the currents of old reminiscences edged with new revelations. Sitting there, the passage of time dissolved, leaving only the essence of their friendship, enduring and unbroken. "You've made waves, Beth," Kurt said, admiration woven through his voice. "The woman who once led us through the haze of battle is now leading a different kind of charge." Beth laughed softly, a sound like autumn leaves falling gently, her eyes alight with nostalgia. "It's funny, I never thought I'd end up here, in this way. But here we are," she replied, her hand sweeping to encompass the living tapestry of letters and stories spread across the table. "This path, it chose me as much as I chose it." They spoke at length, recounting shared experiences and the shifting landscapes of their now divergent lives. Kurt, having been active in veteran affairs himself, was deeply engaged in such narratives, his days filled with advocacy and efforts to bridge the gaps between civilian life and military service. He leaned back, contemplating the myriad paths that had led them here. "Seeing you take the helm of such a transformative moment," he mused, "reminds me that service never truly ends. It adapts and finds new forms." Beth nodded, her gaze moving to the window where twilight edged into the room, casting long shadows that played alongside their memories. It was a moment of quiet harmony, where the external world dimmed, leaving space for reflection. "Tell me, Kurt," she began after a pause, curiosity threading her voice, "how do you see us, those who've served, fitting into this bigger picture of change?" His answer was immediate, laden with conviction. "By leading with the values that uniform instilled in us: honor, perseverance, strength through adversity. We carry these beyond service, weaving them into the civilian fabric, broadening its resilience." His words landed like stones in still waters, sending ripples outward, a reminder that their journey from soldiers to civilians was not an abandonment of duty, but a continuation of it. Just as they had fought for peace on foreign soil, they now fought for justice and equality at home. As the evening deepened into night, their conversation turned towards the future, towards dreams of what could be achieved if communities continued building bridges rather than walls. They imagined a world where every voice uplifted sang in the key of equity, where change's tapestry was as rich and varied as those who wove it. Before parting, they agreed to collaborate, merging their experiences to further projects aimed at bridging veteran stories with broader community narratives, sharing knowledge and fostering understanding. Kurt departed, shadows lengthening in his wake, leaving behind the enduring glow of rekindled friendship and shared mission. The echoes of his presence remained, mingling with the memories of days past and visions of what lay ahead. Beth found herself alone again, but not lonely. Instead, she was enriched by the renewed connection and the promise of continued collaboration, reminded that no matter how solitary the journey sometimes felt, she was part of a lineage of action-bound souls, each contributing to an unceasing march toward equity and peace. The night gathered itself around her in its comforting embrace, a gentle reminder that as long as there were stories to be told, battles to be fought, and dreams to be realized, she would not stand alone. Together, they were a beacon illuminating paths untrodden, their light steadfast against the darkness, a testament to the unyielding spirit of purpose that guided them toward a horizon perpetually reborn. The momentum of Beth's journey and the surrounding community's transformation had reached the national stage, garnering attention from media outlets beyond those she had initially encountered. With each retelling of her story, the narrative broadened to encompass an evolving spectrum of systemic change, one where individual action crescendoed into collective movement. It was during this time that Beth received an invitation to a national symposium focused on race, justice, and systemic reform, a gathering of thought leaders, activists, and policymakers dedicated to shaping a more equitable landscape. The symposium promised to amplify voices like hers, their stories lighting the path for legislative and cultural evolution across the nation. The event was held in Washington, D.C., a city pulsing with history and future promise alike. As Beth entered the grand conference hall, its high ceilings and ornate architecture spoke of formidable narratives forged within its walls, a poignant backdrop to the mission she and her peers were there to advance. The room thrummed with the energy of hundreds gathered, each individual a bearer of stories etched with courage and resilience. Beth's heart swelled with pride and apprehension, the weight of her responsibility as a representative of broader struggles resting delicately upon her shoulders. As the symposium commenced, a keynote speaker took the stage, a civil rights pioneer whose efforts had sown the seeds of change decades prior. His words, steeped in the wisdom of hard-fought battles, resonated deeply with those present, their collective resolve crystallizing in response to his message of hope and accountability. Amidst these proceedings, Beth was invited to participate in a panel discussion, a platform set to explore the intersections of personal stories and public policy. The assembly before her was a tapestry woven from diverse experiences, each speaker chosen not just for their accolades, but for the impact of their actions in the ongoing pursuit of justice. As Beth took her seat on stage, flanked by individuals whose courage mirrored her own, she met the eyes of the audience, a sea of expectant faces, representing the myriad layers of a society yearning for healing. The moderator introduced her as a catalyst for change, referencing the narrative that had begun in a small parking lot, now extending into corridors of influence and advocacy. Beth Hawkins, he proclaimed, has shown us how a singular act of resistance can evolve into sustained activism, illuminating paths for communities to follow. Her journey, always shared, was now a vessel carrying the stories of countless others, each one like a lantern held aloft against the vast shadows of injustice. It was a moment thick with the kind of possibility that quickened the heart and invigorated the spirit. When it was her turn to speak, Beth's voice rose steady and clear, each word measured yet filled with passion. What started as a single act of defiance has transformed through the power of community. Our journey teaches us that the walls dividing our understanding must be dismantled, not just through policy, but through the empathy-driven actions of ordinary people. Her message reverberated through the hall, mingling with the ideas of fellow panelists. A teacher who had transformed an inner-city school, a lawmaker pushing for landmark legislative reforms, and an artist whose work bridged historical divides with contemporary conversation. Together, their voices harmonized into a powerful declaration of intent to ensure that justice reached far beyond rhetoric, into the realms of action and equity. The audience responded with applause, a testament not only to the narratives shared, but to the commitment they inspired to carry these stories forward, nurturing them into gardens of change, where understanding blossomed into policy and unity. Following the panel, Beth mingled with attendees, engaging in dialogues that stretched from personal anecdotes to strategies for affecting state and national policy. Each conversation was an exchange of ideas, tempered by the fire of perseverance, underscoring the collective strength of a movement bound by shared purpose. As the day drew to a close, a sense of achievement hummed quietly through the room, neither complacent nor satisfied, but aware of the work yet to come. Each participant left carrying a piece of the symposium in their hearts, charged with the mission to return to their own communities, armed with fresh insights and renewed dedication. Beth lingered a moment longer, absorbing the gravity of the experience. She knew she stood on the shoulders of giants, past and present, names etched in the annals of justice, voices intertwining across generations. That night, under the stars of a city that had witnessed nations birthed and dreams deferred, Beth reflected on the journeys ahead. Her commitment to the cause was unwavering, burnished by the knowledge that the movement was not hers alone, but belonged to all who dared to challenge inequality and stand uncompromisingly on the side of justice. Together they had begun crafting a world where justice and unity were not fleeting ideals but tangible realities, building a mosaic of brighter tomorrows from the fortified promises of today. After leaving the cafe, Beth strolled through the quiet streets, the cool night air a balm against the whirl of thoughts and plans that filled her mind. The essence of what they were building together, the networks of stories and intertwined fates, felt tangible, like a weave she could almost grip, textured by the lives and experiences of her community. As she walked, the legacy of their efforts seemed to whisper from every corner. The newly painted murals on brick walls depicted not just faces of local heroes, but abstract representations of unity and strength. The community gardens, once barren plots, now thrived under communal care, a testament to what could be accomplished when hands joined together. These visible changes were manifestations of the invisible ones, the shifts in mindsets, the blossoming empathy, the dismantled barriers between neighbors who once moved past each other like ghosts. They were all strands of the broader narrative Beth had helped to weave, a narrative that was now binding her town with an unbreakable thread of determination and hope. As if compelled by an unseen force, Beth found her feet carrying her toward the community center, where the sounds of a youth group meeting floated out into the night. The blend of laughter and earnest debate reached her ears, drawing her into the warmth of engagement like a moth to flame. Inside, she discovered a circle of young people, their faces animated by the glow of shared ideas, hands gesturing broadly as they spoke. They were discussing plans for a day of unity, an event envisioned to celebrate diversity and encourage dialogue among generations. Beth watched from the periphery, her heart swelling with admiration for the manner in which these young leaders embraced the mantle of change. Noticing her presence, one of the youth leaders, Kayla, waved her over with bright enthusiasm. "Beth, join us," she exclaimed, her voice brimming with the kind of optimism that inspires movements. Beth stepped into the circle, greeted by eager smiles and inquisitive eyes that mirrored the future challenges and joys that lay ahead. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said apologetically, though her smile belied any need for apology. Caleb dismissed her concern with a wave, her sense of inclusivity as natural as breathing. "We were just brainstorming for the Unity Day event. We want it to be a real celebration, but also a time to reflect and engage in meaningful conversations." Another young man, Alex, chimed in. "We're thinking of workshops, cultural showcases, possibly a storytelling booth where people can share their experiences. We want it to represent everyone. We want everyone to feel seen and heard." Beth listened intently, her spirit lifted by their vision and drive. She offered her insights, suggesting activities that could bridge generational divides, such as collaborative art projects or panel discussions pairing elders and youth to share perspectives. The room buzzed with excitement as plans cemented into outlines and ideas transformed into actionable proposals. The energy was infectious, an affirmation that this new generation had taken firmly hold of the torch, ready to carry it forward with unwavering resolve. Beth's contributions were interspersed with laughter and stories, each tale a thread connecting the past with the present, guiding the future with gentle wisdom. As she spoke, she felt the weight of her experiences, woven like a tapestry around them, an ever-present reminder that they were part of something far greater than themselves, a vast continuum of voices and actions echoing through time. As the hour grew late and the meeting concluded, the young leaders dispersed into the night with promises to reconvene soon, their energy a bright beacon against the dark sky. Beth lingered for a moment, her heart humming with the syncopated rhythm of potential and progress, hearts beating together across the landscape of change. Walking home, she reflected on the threads of connection they had spun, networks of support and understanding that were stronger for their diversity and depth. She understood that their community's story was a shared manuscript, written in collective action, transformed by the myriad voices that contributed to its ongoing creation. Beth knew the work was far from over, the journey toward justice never truly completed, but ever evolving with each turn of the page. But tonight, beneath the vast expanse of stars that witnessed their march forward, she felt the promise of perseverance greater than any single struggle, the shared promise of tomorrow. In the hushed embrace of the night, Beth Hawkins sensed the power of what they had set in motion and reveled in the knowledge that together they were crafting a legacy for future storytellers to cherish and build upon, a living testament to the unyielding light of unity amidst the shadows of division. And with each step she took, she reminded herself that the fire of change burned not just in her, but in everyone willing to forge their stories with courage and compassion, creating a world where every shared narrative propelled their community further into the light. The days turned into weeks, and the anticipation for the Day of Unity event swelled within the community like a rising tide. The collective energy grew palpable as volunteers finalized arrangements to ensure every voice had a place, every story a stage, and every hope a canvas upon which to be painted. Beth Hawkins, ever at the heart of this vibrant movement, found herself continually nourished by the passion and resilience emanating from those around her. On the dawn of the event, the town awoke to the gentle caress of sunbeams filtering through trees, casting patterns like intricate lace across the paths already bustling with preparation. Vendors set up booths adorned with multicolored banners, musicians tested their instruments' chords, and artists positioned their easels under the open sky. Beth arrived early, absorbing the scene with quiet joy. The space reflected the harmonious diversity that had grown within the town, a tapestry woven together by shared dreams and collective effort. Her heart swelled with gratitude as she moved among the early morning bustle, offering words of encouragement and soaking in the vibrant anticipation. As the event unfolded throughout the day, the air filled with the melodies of celebration. Diverse cultural showcases captivated audiences, traditional dances that spoke in the language of heritage, culinary tables that invited taste buds on worldwide journeys, and workshops that encouraged participants to weave understanding from dialogue and art. Beth found herself at the storytelling booth, a popular spot where townspeople, young and old, gathered to share their narratives. With each story told, a new thread of connection unfurled, binding together a tapestry of shared experiences and individual triumphs. A young girl with eyes wide with wonder approached the booth, her voice a treble note full of eager anticipation. "Miss Hawkins," she began, clutching a small notebook tightly, "can you tell a story about when you were my age?" Beth knelt to meet the girl's gaze with a soft smile, her mind sifting through the chronicles of her past. She settled on a tale of her first adventure into the woods near her childhood home, how her curiosity had led her to discover a hidden grove, lush and green with the promise of mystery. As she recounted the story, the girl listened, captivated, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of discovery mirrored in Beth's words. When she finished, the girl giggled, her spirit eager to embark on her own explorations someday. Throughout the day, the unity that had been cultivated resonated through every song sung, every handshake exchanged, a magnificent crescendo in the symphony of progress. The event's success was not measured solely by numbers, but by the multitude of connections that flourished under the gentle touch of empathy and mutual respect. As dusk stretched its arms over the town, painting the sky in shades of lavender and rose, a sense of fulfillment enveloped the grounds. The day's activities wound down to a final gathering, with Beth taking the stage to address the crowd, her family, friends, fellow advocates, each one an integral note in their collective harmony. She spoke with the conviction of one who had witnessed horizons broadened by the courage of companionship. "Today, we have shared not just our stories, but our hearts," she began, her voice strong with gratitude. "In listening, we have found understanding. In celebrating, we have renewed our commitment to one another. Let us carry this spirit forward, for it is only the beginning." Her words met the gathering dust with a warmth that matched the glow of lanterns being lit by attendees, each flicker a promise to remain a beacon of hope. As the flames danced, they symbolized the continuity of their efforts, a light in the darkness, a reminder that even when night fell, Their shared illumination would guide the way. As people lingered, unwilling for the evening to conclude, Beth looked out over the gathered crowd and asked softly, "What stories will we write tomorrow? What dreams will we dare to realize?" The response came not in words, but in the shimmer of eyes catching the glow of lanterns, in the gentle embraces exchanged and the quiet laughter shared. It was an unspoken vow, a collective commitment to work for a future where justice and unity were not just ideals, but lived realities. And so, wrapped in the embrace of community, under the tapestry of an endless sky, Beth Hawkins understood with profound clarity that they had set into motion a never-ending narrative, a story that would echo through time, resilient and bold in its unwavering stance for what is right. As the last of the lanterns were released to the heavens, carried on the whispers of dreams, Beth turned to leave, heart full with the knowledge that together they had crafted a legacy of light, one that would blaze even in the darkest nights, casting its serene radiance over generations yet to come. And in the tranquil silence that followed, as the stars began to reclaim the sky, Beth whispered to herself the question that always lingered in her heart. Will you be the storyteller of change? Will you carry this light forward? In response, there came the soft rustle of leaves, an approving nod from the earth itself, acknowledging the enduring power of stories and the never-ending journey toward justice.